Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Yell at Us for Parking in a Reserved Space? Get Arrested and Evicted. Disclaimer. Unit 8 was rented by Rick and Tara, not owned. Last winter, around January, me, my family, and close friends were staying at our condo in Vermont for New Year's to celebrate, ski, etc. My dad owns the 8-unit complex our condo is in, and all but one had people up for the holidays. There's a decent amount of area for parking, but when there's a lot of people all there at once, it can get tight. So, one night after returning from the mountain, we parked in the spot closest to the stairs to unload everything easier. Our parking lot isn't one with actual spots or anything because it's just gravel and dirt, so it's really just eyed out and first come, first serve. A few hours later, my brother went to the car to get something from the car where there was a cardboard sign left on the car. The sign read, Reserved Parking for Unit 8. Handicapped, on both sides. And yes, they forget the N in handicapped on both sides as well. Like I said, there's no specific spots for anyone. Unit 8 was one of the smaller units on the ground level, about half the size of the rest. The couple that rented there was sketchy, to say the least. They had to be in their mid-20s, but we never saw them much, and didn't know too much about them. Let's just call them Rick and Tara. Another 20 minutes later and I go down to the car to get some forgotten gloves. As I unlock the car, the lights alert them someone's at the car, and through the window Rick starts yelling at me telling me I have to move the car by the morning, or they'd have it towed. At this point, I can also realize that Rick is off of something, so I subsequently ignore him, grab my things, and head back up. I get into the condo and explain to my dad the experience I just had with Rick. At this point he'd had enough and decided he was gonna go down there himself to handle things himself. So, he goes down there to talk to him. My dad was really the only person that had met them before, but it was briefly during the leasing of their unit. He knocks on the door and it's about 30 seconds until Rick angrily answers the door. He crankily asks, "What do you want?" And my dad politely explains that no spots are reserved and that it is first come, first serve. Rick instantly starts freaking out, saying that it's a handicapped spot and that they're gonna call the landlord. They had little experience with my dad when they leased the place about a year before, and in that time, he was diagnosed with cancer and lost a lot of weight. With that, his appearance changed drastically. Rick didn't realize he was speaking to the landlord and kept his rant going. As my dad was going to lay it out for him, he noticed on a table in the living area that there was a pipe of sorts. Paired with the behavior and appearance of Rick at the time, my dad concluded it was a pipe of sorts for drugs. He backpedaled out of the conversation and returned back up to our condo. When he got back in, he called the cops explaining the situation and what he saw. 30 minutes later, cops pull up and start talking to Rick. Going off what my dad told them about the pipe, one of the cops noticed it, but this time out in the open with a bag next to it. At that point it was revealed that they were smoking crack and they were both arrested. Along with that, my dad also evicted them from the property for violating terms, obviously. We ended up renovating the whole place afterwards because who knows how long they'd been smoking that inside. The upside is that the cardboard sign still hangs in the living room and gives us a laugh each time we pass. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Yes, I agree, the more climactic, no Rick. I am your landlord. Followed by a ski pole lightsaber duel would have been cooler. A lot cooler. Edit 2. I see a lot of fuss over the handicapped spot and let me confirm that neither Rick nor Tara had any disability or handicap. And sorry for the shitty spelling, but throughout the story I meant to be saying they were renters, not buyers. Also see a bunch of you quite mad about how we handled things. If you're a landlord and someone's smoking crack in the unit you're renting out to them, then most likely you're going to have them removed. I feel for the addicts that have corrected themselves, and I hope the best for Rick and Tara. Also, they're not locked up. They were in for an overnight, so please save my inbox the horrors. The next story is titled, Am I the asshole for not charging my son rent on a home he partially owns? My oldest son, 24, is not my wife's biological child and is my child with my late wife. My late wife and I bought a 3-bedroom house when we got married. When I remarried, my current wife moved into this house with me, but I never put her name on the deed. The house was only in my name. My wife and I ended up having several children and needing to move into a bigger house. When we bought our new home, she wanted me to sell the old one. I said no, that this home was something my late wife and I purchased with the hope of one day passing on to our son. I would make it a rental property instead. That was one of the biggest fights we ever had. She insisted we compromise, but I refused to do so. When my son graduated from college, I put his name on the deed to the house with mine, which was another fight, but I felt he was the appropriate inheritor to his mother's share. I didn't share any of the rental income with him, as I was still paying all the taxes and insurance. At this point, the mortgage is paid off. I net over $2,000 a month from this house, which goes into the household budget. My son just got engaged and wants to move into the house after he marries his fiancée. He suggested he pay half rent and eventually buy out my share of the house. I told my son I agreed to his plan of saving up to buy out my share, but instead of paying rent, he should just take over the taxes and insurance. We agreed to this. My wife is livid and says I am a massive asshole for dramatically decreasing our household income without consulting her. She likened my decision to financial abuse. I suggested we downsize to a smaller house now that our oldest 2 kids are leaving the nest, and we can rent out the larger one and be in the same situation as before, owning 2 homes and getting rental income from one. She called me a selfish prick and won't speak to me now. Am I the asshole? Update. Thanks to everyone that shared their perspectives. Looking at outside points of view was enlightening. This house is very complicated for me. I bought this house with my first wife, and for a long time, it represented the life not lived, a past that can't be reclaimed. Every room held memories that were a pitfall of emotion. One of the biggest fights I ever had with my current wife was about repainting the toddler's room, which I had last repainted with my late wife. Moving out of that house probably saved my marriage. We got to start over in a home that was just ours. So, while yes, the home is a financial asset, it's also a source of emotional turmoil. Each time I walk inside, I'm hit with a bittersweet feeling, as I remember something I did there with my late wife. Anyway, I took my son and his fiancée to dinner. I talked to them about the house and what it represents. They talked about their plans to start a family there, just like his mom and I did. That made me emotional. I said I wanted to go ahead and put the house in both their names, even though they weren't married yet. I've been thinking a lot about his mom lately, and I think this is what she would want. They aren't going to pay me anything, but they are insisting on paying all the fees associated with drawing up a new deed, which is fine. They also don't want me to contribute anything financially to the wedding anymore. I agreed with these things, although I will still get them a gift. For a long time, that house has been full of strangers, but now my late wife's pictures will be on the walls again, and her family will grow inside. I think she will like that. Deep down, I always thought of that house as hers, so this makes me happy. The conversation with my wife was a little more complicated. When I told her I was giving them the houses, not having them buy me out, and I was going to do it before the wedding, she was really annoyed. She said it was a dumb decision, and that I was taking a huge financial risk on someone not even related to me, my son's fiancé. She asked what I would do if they broke up. We argued for a while, but she eventually said she was done talking about it, but that she was very disappointed in me. We've lived in our current house 16 years. It's a massive home that we don't really need anymore, with 1 kid moved out and 2 kids on the verge of moving out. I think we should downsize from a 6-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, but I'm going to wait until she isn't mad anymore to suggest this again. With the way the real estate market has gone, we could rent out the individual rooms in this house for close to 3 times what our mortgage payment on it is, and live in a smaller, more manageable property. She may or may not go for this, it depends. Regardless, we are in a fine financial situation. I feel good about my decision. It isn't about the money, it's about honoring those who are gone, and I feel like I did that. The next story is titled, "Make My Wife and Sister Cry on My Wedding Day?" Okay, now go find another job. My wife wanted us to get married in a church. I have my opinions about that, but given that she wanted it, and it would make her happy, that made me happy, so I gave no pushback on that whatsoever. Let's forget about the fact that the benevolent, generous, loving church required a $1,000 donation to conduct the ceremony and sign the marriage certificate, but I digress. Come the wedding day, we walk down the aisle surrounded by friends and family. The ceremony goes wonderfully. We walk back out and start talking to some of the guests and smile, laugh, and just be happy. I then noticed my sister, who was part of my wedding party, was teary-eyed. I looked closer and noticed she had been crying. I asked her what had happened, why she was crying, but she wouldn't budge. I then found out my wife had also been crying before the ceremony. I then come to find out that this deacon, who had been part of the ceremony, had told my wife, right before she was to walk down the aisle and get married, that she couldn't do so because she didn't have a veil. She was told, right before she was to be married, that she wasn't allowed to walk down the aisle because of a ducking veil. Let's just say I was seeing red. Let's just say I was prepared to burn down the world. Let's just say, I became angry. I knew that my sister's tears were something to do with that deacon as well, which made this 100 times worse. But I wasn't about to ruin my wife's wedding day by making a scene, and my friends encouraged me to deal with it later as well. So, I temporarily let it go. Rest of the wedding day went phenomenally. Everyone had a blast, and we couldn't have been happier. But when we got back from the honeymoon, I took a trip to that church. I took 2 trips to that church. In fact, I took 3 trips to that church. Each time, I calmly, but with what I expect was the look demonic anger on my face, went to their front office and complained, and argued, and fought with literally anyone who was there. I demanded to speak with whoever was in charge, not the man upstairs obviously, and spoke to some head of the church board or some crap like that. I demanded punishment for that deacon, for a face-to-face apology, for some kind of repercussion or retribution for bringing my wife and sister to tears on my wedding day. I'm a lawyer, so I've gotten very used to arguing. And arguing. As much as I wanted to throttle the man that did this, I forced the civilized lens to take precedence and dealt with it that way. It's been months. From what I've been told, and from my own observations, he's been fired. I was also told that he had a reputation, whatever that meant, but I'm convinced my poking and prodding and stabbing at the subject finally got that miserable prick fired from his oh-so self-righteous position. My sister still hasn't told me what made her cry that day, but the coincidence is just too great. Not sure if this should be posted to IATA or some other subreddit, but hey, it felt good to tell this story, and I'm just glad I was able to mete out some vengeance. The last story is titled, I planted bamboo that overrun my neighbor's property over a security light. About 4 years ago I used to live in a nice HOA in a small town in Texas and enjoyed having only one neighbor over my backyard fence. The plot was about 2 acres and the other side of the backyard butted up to a hayfield. The stars were beautiful at night because of virtually no light pollution. Until the neighbor decided to install an incredibly bright security light over their back porch aimed right at my back patio and bedroom windows. I tried to ignore it at first and put shades in the bedroom, but out on the patio it was like having a bright LED headlight in your face all night. I consulted the HOA about adding a privacy addition to my fence to increase its height, and they said no because it's already at the 8 feet max allowed height. They said there was nothing in the bylaws or whatever about bright lights, so nothing they could do. Diplomacy. So, I hated for this to be the thing where we finally had a formal greeting after 3 years of back porch waves, but I walked over and rang the doorbell with $20. I politely explained how the light was causing the aforementioned nuisance and asked if there was any way I could convince him to point the light down or in a different direction, and even offered that to buy him a case of beer, the $20, out of goodwill, and even a new motion sensing light. He seemed nice and agreed to point it down. But after waiting a month, nothing changed. I went back to have another polite conversation and he said he had changed his mind and was going to leave it on every night and leave it pointed as is. Petty revenge. Needless to say, I was a bit upset diplomacy failed and started figuring out how to win. If the military taught me anything, there's always ways to adapt and overcome. So, I started researching fast-growing plants to create big privacy walls and reading through the HOA bylaws and city-state ordinances about what I could or couldn't plant and if there were any repercussions for encroachment across the property line. I quickly discovered running bamboo, despite being very invasive, would grow super fast to make the neighbor's house and light disappear from view, and there was nothing on the HOA, state, city books to prevent me from planting it or cause legal recourse if it spread and grew on his side on the fence. Only thing he could do is cut anything that grew on his side of the line. So I pulled the trigger and planted a bunch of golden bamboo, which grows and spreads crazy fast in Texas and grows up to 20 feet tall. I didn't care if it took over the fence line because his house is 15 feet from the fence while mine was 50 yards away, so I planted a bunch right against the fence and only put root barrier on my side to prevent it spreading into my yard. Within 6 months his house and light were gone from view, replaced by a pretty bamboo jungle row at the edge of my yard. Within 1 year he complained it was growing into his yard via mailed letters. They went right into the trash with no response. He rang my doorbell once and I looked at him through the window but just didn't answer the door. I unexpectedly sold the house and moved 2 years after planning for a career opportunity. It's been 2 years since I sold, and I just checked the property on Google Earth and his entire backyard is bamboo. Thank you for listening.